Hey folks, it's Frederik from the FWX podcast. I want to continue with my coverage of the John Wick franchise. And of course, here's a fun little picture with all the movies that are John Wick centric, of course. There's another one with Ana de Armas that is just out. It's called Ballerina, from the world of John Wick. Something I haven't mentioned yet that is less important but part of this franchise is the TV series that was out some time back. It's called The Continental, which dives deeper into the lore behind John Wick, because for an action franchise, there's some very interesting lore here. And that is, I wouldn't say more fantastical, but a little bit more occult, maybe. And it's with a lot of secrets. It's with a lot of interesting characters. There's actors, amazing actors that play in these roles, both in the Continental and in the franchise. And I want to talk now about the second movie. I got a fun little picture right here of the poster of number 2, chapter 2. And you can see John with all these guns, almost all different. I'm pretty sure not all of them are different. But as you can see, most of them are. If you look closely, you can see that none of them have like a silencer on them, which kind of works in against the movie that is all about action and interesting characters that are driven and motivated by action, by killing people. And so let's dive back into this world with movie number 2 in this episode. And before I do that, I will give you the disclaimer first. I will definitely, or not, or we'll see, flub a word, because I haven't mentioned this in any of my videos just yet, but English is not my first language. So I'm trying my best here. But that still means that I might flub a word. So that's why. Okay. I might also swear, because that also tends to happen a lot in this franchise. And so my text is on the screen, which means that the screen is gonna get brighter, which means that I will get brighter. Also, I didn't say this in the last episode of this franchise, but I might also have a weird pause when I'm looking something up, for instance, or because I get ahead of myself, or my train of thought stops and I stop talking all of a sudden. So, okay, let's get back into the John Wick franchise with number 2. And we start with John in New York, and let's return just a moment more to the disclaimer. I'm gonna talk about the story, I'm gonna talk about the characters and the actors playing the characters, and there's a lot of interesting ones in here. Because with every new movie, there almost always is like a new actor or 2 or 5 or more. So let's dig in. So John is in New York, and he's infiltrating a compound that is run by Abram Tarasov, who is the brother of Viggo, who is played. So you have 2 brothers that are part of the mafia in New York. And I talked about Viggo in the last episode because he's played by Michael Nyqvist. And Abram Tarasov is played in this movie by Peter Stormare, or however you're supposed to say that name. And so Abram is a little high-strung because his nephew and his brother have just died at John's hands. So he's unsure of what to do. But we find John here in this compound, and he is fighting all of Tarasov's men, of course. And here, John finds his old car, his Boss 439 Mustang. But he manages to stop his killing spree and not kill Abram, as they promised to keep peace. And so John goes back home with his car. He gets it to Aurelio from the first movie, who once again is played by John Leguizamo. They kind of look like each other, don't they? Leguizamo and Stormare. So anyway, Aurelio has a chop shop where John wants his car to be repaired, and so he can continue his life of solitude and quiet and peace. And later that day, at night, John is visited by someone else from this crime world that he used to be part of, a man known with the name of Santino D'Antonio, who is a crime boss of Camaro, which is one of the Italian mafia. And this guy is played by Riccardo Scamarcio. I hope I said that right. Normally my Italian is decent. So Santino is played by Riccardo Scamarcio. And Santino thinks that John is back from his retirement and is looking for his services, because John is bound by what is called a marker, which is a medallion that symbolizes a blood oath with Santino. And this whole reason that Santino is looking for him is because he used to help John get out of the life with that impossible task that Vigo had John do, so that he could retire from the life and stay and live with Helen, his dead wife. Yeah. So John, who is reluctant about this, refuses and tells it to Santino face to face. So Santino goes away from the house, only to turn around and shoot it with a fucking grenade launcher, which is different words for a bazooka. And so John amazingly survives this attack on his home, and he goes back to New York City and to the Continental Hotel, which is owned by an old friend of his from the first movie, Winston, played by Ian McShane. And Winston confirms to him again of the strictly enforced rules of the underworld. That is, no killing on continental grounds, and to honor the marker that you have, if you have one. And so John has no other choice except death than to accept Santino's marker. And Santino's whole idea was to get more power for himself, like villains usually do. Except that this is a way more personal one, which unfortunately is also a trope that needs to die, basically. And the person that Santino wants dead is his own sister, Gianna, who is played in this movie by this woman, Claudia Gerini. I'm assuming that's how you say it. Claudia Gerini, who plays Gianna. And but there's a specific kind of power that she holds that Santino wants, and that is a seat at a place, at a thing rather, like a very powerful thing called the High Table, which is a council of crime bosses in the underworld, and they sit at this table, the High Table, and there are 12 crime bosses. And so John goes to where Gianna is, to Italy, to its capital, to Rome. And Santino sends someone along with John, and there is a second person in this picture right here, Ruby Rose. And I know her from playing Batwoman on the CW show of the same name. And so Ruby plays a mute bodyguard called Ares, who observes how John is doing on his mission to kill Santino's sister. And so once John is in Rome, he goes, of course, to Gianna. And Gianna is about to be coronated, is about to be crowned. And there's clearly some kind of history between the two of them. And John finds Gianna in her dressing room at the place she is at. And John tells her about everything, that Santino wants her dead, and that he has to do it. And so she sees no other choice than to go out on her own accord. And so she chooses to fake her own death, or rather, make it look like she did it herself. And so she slits her wrists as she is in a bath. And just before this happens, she and John come to a deal where she will do this and he will shoot her in the head so she doesn't suffer, which fulfills the marker that John and Santino have. And as John leaves, he is attacked by Gianna's bodyguard, a guy named Cassian, played in this movie by a very well-known person, the rapper called Common. This is him. And this allows John... Well, he is forced to flee. I was almost gonna say that he is allowed things, but no. He is attacked by Cassian, the bodyguard of Gianna, and John has to go into the catacombs close by, and I'm gonna be brief about something for a moment. Before everything at the place where Gianna slits her wrists, we see John prepare for this mission, and he stashes some gear in the catacombs close by. And so we find John back in the catacombs where he finds that weaponry that he had set up for himself. And here he is attacked by the agent that Santino set behind him, played by Ruby Rose, Ares. So that there are no more loose ends for on Santino. I'm saying that a bit different. So Santino doesn't want anything to do with John anymore, so he has Ares kill John. And so, but of course, she's not alone, and we get another classic John Wick action sequence. More, not just a scene, but a sequence of scenes where John just lays waste to these fools, killing most of them. And we find that John is again pursued by Cassian, played by Common, and that gets them. It's a sort of chase scene, but also fighting at the same time, and this ultimately gets them into the Continental in Rome. And they're stopped there, of course, because they're about to kill each other, which is forbidden on the Continental, as I've said before. And so they talk, and John explains to Cassian that he was forced to kill Gianna because of the marker that he has with Santino. And Cassian, on his part, tells John that he understands, but that doesn't mean that that John goes unpunished. But he does promise John that if he manages to kill him, it will be a quick death. And we find the person responsible for the Continental in Rome, a man named Julius, was played in this movie by this man, Franco Nero. And he gives John safe passage back to New York. And as this is happening, we cut back to Santino. Again, was played by this gentleman, Riccardo Scamarcio. God damn that name. Riccardo Scamarcio plays Santino, and he has opened a contract to have John killed, which is like hypocrisy in itself, because he wanted John to kill his sister, but now he has to avenge his sister as justification for him to kill John. And we see John scene for scene as he fights off many different hitmen or assassins, and sometimes that marker. It's a gray zone, is what I'm trying to say here. Is that a hitman and an assassin often cross lines or the very same thing. And while this is happening, we see Winston, played by Ian McShane, visit Santino in the hotel in the Continental to confirm that the marker has been fulfilled. And so John is free to go, which is a smart play on Winston's part, because that means that he won't go after Santino, so that John is practically free and could still be a threat to Santino, basically. And on John's way back to the Continental, he goes through the subway in New York, where he encounters Cassian again, and the two of them fight, not in the typical gun-to-gun play that John normally does, but by knives and daggers. A bit more cloak and dagger. For those who don't know what that means, cloak and dagger is this kind of like secretive way of meeting people, just to make it seem that nothing is happening. But of course, something is happening, and John stabs Cassian in his aorta, which leaves him about to die from spilling his blood. From spilling his blood. But John, of course, because of all the assassins that he had to face, he got hurt too. And so he goes to a place that is owned by another interesting person from the criminal underworld, the Bowery King. And the Bowery King in this movie is played by the incredible Lawrence Fishburne, who you will also know from Keanu Reeves' other work, The Matrix, where they played opposite each other. And also, Lawrence Fishburne played the original giant in the Ant-Man movies from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay. And so the Bowery King is very intrigued by everything that John has been going through. And he gives John a very specific kind of pistol to fulfill the contract that he sets John up with. Yeah. And so this pistol is a Kimber M1911 pistol and 7 bullets. One for each million of this contract. And the Bowery King points John to an art museum where Santino is the host of a gala there. And of course, we get another classic John Wick action sequence where John goes into the museum and kills all of the bodyguards, including, of course, the one that had been sent after him, Ares. Which leaves Santino time to escape the museum and go to the Continental, where he is bragging that he basically has sanctuary. Kind of like the scene in the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Yeah, and so Santino is very bashful about all of this. And of course, he's instructed by the Continental's owner, Winston, that he restrain himself. But of course, John gets into the Continental and for once doesn't follow the rules, and he executes Santino in the lounge there. With, I believe, a bullet to the head. And as I said already, takes full responsibility of breaking one of the most important rules for the Continental. Yeah. Okay, and so we cut to the next day as John and Winston meet as the Italian mafia that Santino used to be part of has now doubled the bounty that he has put on John's head. And they do this, of course, abroad because they're based in Italy. And Winston is now forced to do something that is part of all of this underground lore, the criminal underground lore. It's specifically for the Continental, and all because John wanted and actually did execute Santino inside the Continental, and so Winston is forced to declare John excommunicado which terminates all the privileges and the access that he used to have to the criminal underworld. But because they know each other well and because they're friends, Winston delays this by just 1 hour. And also a marker that John can use in the future. And to end this interesting conversation, John tells Winston that he should tell every person that they send after him, whether they're a hitman or an assassin or anything in between that the High Table sends after him, that he will kill every single one that comes and hunt him down. And so as John exits the hotel, Winston initiates the excommunicado process, which sets it off for an hour. And we see the end scene of this movie as John is running through a rain-soaked New York, while everywhere around him people are getting up their phones, checking for the numbers, the contacts of the Camorra that Camorra has set up to send every possible assassin that is out there in New York City to go after John Wick, the Baba Yaga. And this sets directly into the third movie. And so that is the end of this movie. And I don't normally do rankings, but if I were to, this will be number 3 for me when it comes to the franchise. And so personally, I really love this movie. It is not my favorite, but it's still a very decent and very good action movie. And you can watch it, you can rent it, you can find it and watch it. So that is this episode of the FW podcast. I'm Frederik. I want to ask you before we end this one more time to like the video. You can also subscribe to the channel if you would like this kind of content. And I'd also like you to share this kind of video with people you know. I don't care if it's family, friends, or people from work, or just online in communication with each other on the internet, on YouTube, and on social media if you like. And speaking of social media, you can also follow me, Frederik. And so I want to thank you one last time, and I will see you in the next video as I cover the John Wick franchise. So, until then.